The blistering summer sun beat down on the dusty Texas horizon as Katherine Jones clutched her tattered satchel, heart pounding wildly against her ribs. Blood trickled from a cut above her brow where Bartholomew Raines' ring had caught her skin not 2 hours earlier. She hadn't planned to flee on her wedding day, but when the man who'd promised to be her husband revealed his true nature with cruel fists and whiskey-soaked threats, Katherine knew she had no choice but to run. The year was 1875, and Katherine's desperate gamble as a mail-order bride had led her straight into the clutches of a monster. The advertisement in the Eastern newspaper had painted Raines as a successful cattle rancher seeking a genteel wife. What it failed to mention was his legendary temper and the fact that 2 previous wives had mysteriously fallen ill and died within a year of their weddings. Hiking her skirts, Katherine pushed through the tall grass, constantly glancing over her shoulder. Raines and his men would be looking for her by now. The wedding guests had barely dispersed when he'd shown his true colors, dragging her to the bedroom with intentions that made her stomach turn. The letter opener she'd grabbed from his desk had given her just enough leverage to escape, but she knew her time was running short. The train station loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the small town of Cactus Springs. If she could just reach it before Raines caught up to her, she might have a chance at freedom. Her entire dowry, the last of her family's savings, was now in Raines' possession, leaving her with nothing but the few coins she'd managed to grab during her escape. "Miss, are you all right?" The deep, concerned voice startled Katherine, causing her to whirl around, hands raised defensively. Before her stood a tall man with kind eyes the color of weathered sage, his brow furrowed with worry beneath a well-worn Stetson. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but carried the honest dirt of hard work rather than the polished veneer Raines had maintained. I need to get on that train," she stammered, aware of how wild she must look with her torn wedding dress and frantic expression. The stranger glanced past her toward town, where the commotion was growing. "Seems you're in some trouble. That wouldn't happen to be Bartholomew Raines' men coming this way, would it?" Katherine's eyes widened. "You know him." "Everyone knows Raines," the man said grimly. "And any woman running from him has good reason." He extended a weathered hand. "Name's Yates Sutton. Got a horse just around the bend. Train won't leave for another hour, but those men will be here in 5 minutes." Katherine hesitated only briefly before accepting his outstretched hand. "Katherine Jones," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Well, Miss Jones, I reckon we better move quickly." With surprising gentleness, Yates helped her onto his chestnut stallion before mounting behind her. As they galloped away from town, Katherine could hear the angry shouts of Raines' men fading behind them. She had no reason to trust this cowboy, yet the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her back gave her the first moment of peace she'd felt in months. "Where are we going?" she asked over the pounding of hooves. "My ranch is about 10 miles north. You can stay there until we figure out what to do next." His voice held a promise that Katherine was afraid to believe. "Don't worry, Miss Jones. No one will harm you there, that's my word." The prairie stretched out before them, golden in the late afternoon sun. Katherine clung to the saddle horn, acutely aware of the stranger's strong arms on either side of her, keeping her secure. She had fled one man only to put her trust in another, a dangerous gamble, but one that instinct told her was right. "Why are you helping me?" she asked after they'd ridden in silence for several miles. Yates was quiet for a moment before answering. "My sister married a man like Raines. No one helped her when she needed it most." His voice turned rough with emotion. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help you." Something in his tone told Katherine this was no casual good deed. There was history in his words, pain that ran deep. The compassion in his voice made tears spring to her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had cried enough in recent months. As the landscape changed from dusty plains to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and oak, Yates pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a green valley. "That's Sutton Ranch. Not as grand as Raines' place, but it's honest land earned by honest work. The ranch wasn't large, but it was well maintained. A modest main house of whitewashed wood stood alongside a sturdy barn and corral. A bunkhouse sat a short distance away, where Katherine could see a few ranch hands going about their evening chores. Several dozen cattle grazed in the nearby pasture, and chickens pecked at the ground near a small vegetable garden. As they approached, a grizzled older man with a silver mustache emerged from the barn, his eyebrows rising at the sight of Katherine in her torn wedding dress. "Abe," Yates called out, "we have a guest who will be staying with us for a while." The older man nodded, asking no questions as he took the reins of Yates' horse after they dismounted. "I'll see to thunder. Miss, you look like you could use some hot food and rest." Katherine's legs trembled as she stood on solid ground again. The adrenaline that had carried her through her escape was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Thank you, sir." Yates guided her toward the house with a gentle hand at her elbow. "Abe's been with my family since before I was born. He's the closest thing to a father I've had since mine passed on." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful quilts that added warmth to the rustic space. A pot of stew bubbled on the stove, filling the air with a savory aroma that made Katherine's empty stomach clench with hunger. "My sister Martha helps keep house," Yates explained, "but she's in town visiting friends. She'll be back tomorrow." He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Please sit. You must be hungry." As he ladled stew into a bowl for her, Katherine took in her surroundings. This was nothing like Raines' ostentatious home with its imported furnishings and pretentious artwork. Yates' home felt lived in and real, with books stacked on tables and a half-finished leather project on a side desk. "I can't stay long," she said after taking her first bite of the hearty stew. "Raines won't stop looking for me. I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Yates sat across from her, his own bowl untouched as he studied her. "Raines knows better than to trespass on Sutton land. There's bad blood between our families that goes back years." "What kind of bad blood?" Katherine asked, curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "The kind that's watered with grief and fertilized with lies," Yates replied cryptically. "But that's a story for another time. Right now you need rest and a plan." Katherine nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. "I don't have much money. Raines has my dowry and I couldn't take my trunk when I fled." "Money's not important right now," Yates said firmly. "What matters is keeping you safe." He hesitated before adding, "Raines isn't a man who accepts defeat easily. He'll spread word that you're a thief or worse to justify hunting you down. Your reputation will be in tatters." The realization hit Katherine like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on escaping immediate danger that she hadn't considered the longer-term consequences. In 1875, a woman alone with a ruined reputation had few options. "I should have stayed," she whispered, horror creeping into her voice, "at least until I had a better plan." "No," Yates' voice was sharp with conviction. "No woman should endure what he would have done to you. You did the right thing by running." His expression softened. "We'll figure this out together, Miss Jones. I promise you that." That night, Katherine slept in a small but clean bedroom that Yates said belonged to his sister. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully, her dreams haunted by Raines' cruel face and grasping hands. She woke several times, heart racing, before finally falling into a deeper sleep as dawn approached. When she finally emerged the next morning, wearing a simple dress Martha had left behind, Yates was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The domestic scene, this rugged cowboy frying bacon and brewing coffee, was so at odds with her expectations that Katherine paused in the doorway. "Good morning, Miss Jones," Yates said without turning around. "Hope you don't mind plain food. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage breakfast without burning down the house." Katherine moved to help him. "Please call me Katherine, and I'd be happy to cook." "It's the least I can do for your hospitality." Their hands brushed as she reached for the spatula, sending an unexpected warmth through her fingers. Yates relinquished the tool with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, revealing a dimple in his left cheek that had been hidden beneath his serious demeanor yesterday. Over breakfast, they discussed their options. Raines will have men watching the train station and likely sent telegrams to nearby towns, Yates explained. Your best chance might be to go further west, maybe even to California, but getting there won't be easy. Katherine nodded, pushing eggs around her plate. I have an aunt in San Francisco. I wrote to her before agreeing to marry Raines, but never received a reply. She looked up, determination replacing fear in her eyes. I can work. I was a teacher back east before my parents died. That's good to know. Yates seemed pleased. There's always need for education out here. But first, we need to make sure Raines loses your trail. Their planning was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Yates was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the pistol at his hip as he peered out the window. It's Martha, he said with relief, and Abe's with her. Katherine followed him onto the porch to greet a young woman with the same sage-green eyes as Yates, though her brown hair was a shade lighter than his dark locks. Martha Sutton dismounted gracefully, her curious gaze taking in Katherine's presence with interest rather than judgment. Well, brother, I leave for 2 days and come back to find you've taken in a stray, she said with a teasing smile before turning to Katherine. I'm Martha, and you must be the reason half the town is in an uproar. This is Katherine Jones, Yates explained. She was to be Raines' bride until she discovered his true nature. Martha's expression darkened. You poor thing, that man is the devil himself. She embraced Katherine warmly. You're safe here, though. The Suttons stick together, and now you're under our protection, too. Abe approached more slowly, his weathered face grave. Raines is offering a $50 reward for information on her whereabouts, claims she stole family heirlooms and cash before running off. Katherine gasped. That's a lie. I took nothing but what I came with. Of course it is, Yates said soothingly. But it gives him legal grounds to pursue you. The sheriff won't intervene if he believes you're a thief. Martha took Katherine's arm supportively. Don't worry, Raines has made plenty of enemies. Not everyone will be eager to help him, reward or no. As they returned inside, Martha began unpacking supplies from town, including fabric and sewing notions. I thought you might need some proper clothes, she explained to Katherine. That wedding dress won't do, and you can't wear my things forever. I'm a good head shorter than you. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Katherine's eyes. Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you all. There's no debt between friends, Martha assured her, squeezing her hand. Over the next few days, Katherine settled into life at Sutton Ranch. She helped Martha with household chores and began making simple dresses from the fabric they'd purchased. Yates was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to sit with Katherine on the porch, discussing everything from books they'd read to their hopes for the future. Katherine found herself drawn to this quiet, thoughtful man, who seemed so different from the rough cowboys she'd imagined populating the West. Yates was educated, with a small but well-curated bookshelf containing volumes of Shakespeare alongside practical guides to animal husbandry and regional botany. He spoke of his dreams to expand the ranch, not out of greed, but to create something lasting that honored his parents' memory. They came west with nothing but hope, he told her one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Built all this from raw land and hard work. They would be proud of what you've accomplished, Katherine said softly. Yates turned to her, his expression unusually vulnerable. I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing right by their legacy. The intimacy of the moment hung between them, fragile and beautiful. Katherine found herself wanting to reach out to touch his face and reassure him of his worth. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap, mindful that her situation remained precarious. On the 7th day of her stay, disaster struck. Katherine was hanging laundry in the yard when the sound of approaching riders made her freeze. Instinctively, she ducked behind the sheets, peering through the gap to see 3 men on horseback approaching the house. She recognized 2 of them as Raines' foremen, men who had sneered at her during her brief time at his ranch. The third was a stranger wearing a deputy's badge. Heart-pounding, Katherine slipped into the house to find Yates. He was already at the door, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. "Stay inside," he told her quietly. "Let me handle this." Through the window, Katherine watched as the men dismounted. The deputy stepped forward, hand resting casually on his holstered gun. "Sutton," he called out. "Got reports you might be harboring a fugitive, Bartholomew Raines' runaway bride who helped herself to his valuables before leaving." Yates' posture remained relaxed, though Katherine could see the tension in his shoulders. "Don't know anything about that, Deputy Miller. Just me, my sister, and our ranch hands here." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't lie to an officer of the law, would you, Sutton?" "That's a serious offense." "Wouldn't dream of it," Yates replied evenly. "But I also don't appreciate unfounded accusations or uninvited guests on my property." One of Raines' men spat on the ground. "We tracked her this direction. Trail led straight to your land." "Lots of travelers use the North Road," Yates countered. "Can't account for every set of hoofprints." The deputy studied Yates for a long moment before sighing. "I'm going to need to search the premises, Sutton, either with your cooperation or without it." Martha appeared at Yates' side, her expression cool. "You have a warrant, Deputy Miller?" The question seemed to irritate the lawman. "Don't need one when I'm pursuing a thief." "Actually, you do," Martha retorted. "Unless you witnessed a crime in progress or have evidence beyond Bartholomew Raines' word, which we all know isn't worth the air it takes to speak it." The standoff continued for several tense minutes, with Deputy Miller clearly weighing his options. Finally, he adjusted his hat and stepped back. "I'll be watching this place, Sutton. If I find out you're obstructing justice, there'll be consequences." As the men rode away, Katherine sagged against the wall, trembling with relief and fear. Yates came inside, his face grave as he set down his rifle. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "And next time they'll likely have a warrant." Katherine pressed her hands to her face. "I've put you all in danger. I should leave tonight." "And go where?" Martha asked practically. "They're watching the roads and the train station." Yates paced the room, thinking. "We need a more permanent solution." He stopped suddenly, turning to Katherine with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There might be a way, but it's not without risk." "What are you suggesting?" Katherine asked. "Marriage," he said bluntly. "If you were my wife, Raines would have no legal claim on you whatsoever. A husband's rights supersede a former fiancé's accusations." Katherine stared at him, stunned by the proposal. "You want me to marry you, but we barely know each other." "It would be a marriage of convenience only," Yates clarified, though something flickered in his eyes that suggested otherwise. "You would have my name and protection, and once Raines moves on to his next victim, you could seek an annulment if you wished." Martha looked between them, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's not the worst idea, Katherine. My brother is stubborn as a mule but honest to a fault. You could do worse for a husband, even a temporary one." Katherine's mind raced with the implications. Marriage had been her goal when she'd agreed to Raines' proposal, but that had been a business arrangement to her companionship and potential children in exchange for financial security. At least with Yates, she wouldn't fear for her safety. "I need time to think," she said finally. Yates nodded, respecting her hesitation. "Of course, but we don't have much time before they return." That night, Katherine sat by her bedroom window, gazing at the stars scattered across the vast Texas sky. In just 1 week, her life had been upended twice, first by Raines' cruelty and then by Yates' unexpected kindness. She'd come west seeking stability and found chaos instead, yet somehow in the midst of that chaos, she discovered a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since her parents' deaths. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Katherine, may I speak with you?" Martha's voice was gentle. When Katherine opened the door, Martha entered and sat on the edge of the bed. "I thought you might have questions. About Yates, I mean," Katherine sighed, sitting beside her. Is he always so? Honorable, Martha laughed softly, to a fault. Our father raised us to believe that character matters above all else. Yates took those lessons to heart. Her expression grew serious. He doesn't make this offer lightly, Katherine. My brother isn't one for impulsive decisions. That's what worries me, Katherine admitted. I don't want him to sacrifice his future out of some misplaced sense of duty. Is it really a sacrifice if it's freely chosen? Martha countered. Besides, I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. She smiled knowingly. Duty might have prompted his offer, but I suspect his heart isn't entirely uninvolved. The thought sent a flutter through Katherine's chest. She'd been so focused on survival that she'd barely acknowledged her growing feelings for Yates. His quiet strength, the gentle way he treated everyone from his sister to the ranch hands, the passion in his voice when he spoke of his dreams, all of it had begun weaving a spell around her heart. I care for him too, she whispered, admitting it aloud for the first time. But everything's happening so fast. What if this is just gratitude confused with deeper feelings? Martha took her hand. Life out here moves at its own pace, sometimes slow as molasses, sometimes quick as a rattlesnake strike. The question isn't whether it's too fast, but whether it feels right. The next morning, Katherine found Yates at the corral, watching as one of the ranch hands worked with a young horse. The early sunlight gilded his profile, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the thoughtful set of his mouth. Seeing him there so at home in this wild, beautiful country, Katherine felt a certainty settle over her. "Good morning," she said, approaching the fence. Yates turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "Katherine, did you sleep well?" "Better than expected," she replied, coming to stand beside him. After a moment of companionable silence, she added, "I've been thinking about your proposal." He turned to face her fully, his expression carefully neutral. "And?" "I'll marry you," Katherine said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "But I want you to understand that I'm not agreeing out of mere necessity. This past week, I've come to." She hesitated, finding the right words, "to care for you, Yates, more than I thought possible in such a short time." The guarded hope in his eyes was worth any risk. "I care for you too, Katherine. I didn't want to speak of it given your circumstances, but if we're to be honest with each other." He took her hand in his touch gentle yet firm. "I've never met anyone like you. Your courage, your kindness, despite everything you've endured, it humbles me." The morning sun warmed their faces as they stood together, hands clasped, future uncertain but somehow full of promise. "So," Katherine said with a small smile, "when do we get married?" "Today, if possible," Yates replied. "The preacher in Willow Creek owes me a favor, and he's discreet enough not to ask too many questions." The day passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Martha helped Katherine alter one of her dresses, adding touches of lace and ribbon to make it suitable for a bride. Yates rode out to speak with the preacher and returned with news that everything was arranged for sunset. As the golden afternoon light began to fade, Katherine found herself in a small church with whitewashed walls and simple wooden pews. Martha had decorated the altar with wildflowers gathered from the prairie, their vibrant colors a testament to the beauty that could flourish even in harsh conditions. Abe stood as witness alongside Martha, his usually gruff demeanor softened by the occasion. The preacher, an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, kept the ceremony brief but meaningful. When Yates slipped a ring onto Katherine's finger, his mother's, Martha had whispered the metal warm from his pocket. Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding day, yet somehow it felt more right than her elaborate preparations for marrying Raines had ever been. "I take you, Katherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Yates said, his voice strong and clear in the quiet church. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." The words, traditional though they were, carried the weight of a personal promise. When Katherine repeated her vows, she meant every word, surprising herself with the depth of emotion behind them. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Yates hesitated, his eyes seeking permission. Katherine closed the distance between them, her heart racing as their lips met in a gentle kiss that held the promise of something far deeper than their hurried arrangement suggested. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, the newlyweds absorbed in their thoughts as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Martha and Abe had gone ahead to prepare a small celebration dinner, leaving Yates and Katherine to follow at their own pace. "Are you all right?" Yates asked as they approached the ranch, the windows of the main house glowing with welcoming lamplight. Katherine nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a week. I came west expecting one life and found something entirely different. Do you regret it?" His question held genuine concern. "No," she answered honestly. "I regret the circumstances that brought me here, but not where I've ended up." She met his gaze. "What about you? This isn't what you planned either." Yates' smile was warm in the twilight. "Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned at all." As they dismounted in front of the house, Yates surprised Katherine by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck as he pushed open the door to find the main room transformed. Martha had outdone herself, with a table set with their best dishes and decorated with more wildflowers and candles. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sutton," Martha said with a bright smile, embracing Katherine as Yates set her down. Even Abe offered a gruff congratulations, pressing a glass of whiskey into Yates' hand with a meaningful nod. The wedding dinner was simple but joyful. Katherine found herself laughing more than she had in months, surrounded by people who had become more dear to her in a week than anyone had been since her parents died. When Martha brought out a small cake she'd baked that afternoon, Katherine was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. As the evening wore on, however, a new tension crept in. Katherine was acutely aware that this was her wedding night, and regardless of the practical reasons for their marriage, tradition expected certain things. When Martha finally announced she was retiring to the bunkhouse for the night, giving the newlyweds privacy in the main house, Katherine felt her cheeks flush with nervous heat. Alone with Yates, she busied herself clearing the table, grateful for the distraction. He helped silently, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked together to restore order to the kitchen. "Katherine," Yates said finally, his voice gentle, "I meant what I said about this being a marriage of convenience. If that's what you want, I would never expect." She turned to face him, summoning her courage. "What if I want more than convenience?" The question hung between them, charged with possibility. Yates moved closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. "Then we take things as slowly as you need. This may have started as a solution to a problem, but my feelings for you are real." Katherine lifted her hand to his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw with trembling fingers. "Mine too." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. When Yates kissed her this time, it was different from the chaste press of lips they'd shared in the church. This kiss held hunger and promise, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as Katherine responded with equal fervor. Later, in the darkness of what was now their shared bedroom, Katherine discovered another side of Yates, one that was passionate yet infinitely gentle, attentive to her every response as they learned each other's bodies. Where Raines had sought to possess and dominate, Yates offered partnership and mutual pleasure, his touch healing wounds she hadn't realized were still raw. "I never thought it could be like this," she whispered afterward, nestled against his chest as they lay tangled in the sheets. Yates stroked her hair, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This is how it should always be between a husband and wife, equal in giving and receiving." Katherine closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the tenderness between them. Perhaps their unconventional beginning was actually a blessing. They had entered marriage with eyes wide open, choosing each other not from societal pressure or financial necessity, but from a connection that had formed despite the chaos surrounding them. The peaceful interlude was short-lived. 3 days after their wedding, Deputy Miller returned to the ranch, this time with a proper warrant and 4 additional men, including one of Raines' foremen. Yates met them in the yard, Katherine at his side, her hand firmly in his. The deputy's eyes narrowed at the sight of them standing together. "Well now, what's this?" he drawled. "Heard rumors you two had gotten hitched but didn't quite believe it. It's true," Yates confirmed calmly. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Mrs. Katherine Sutton." Katherine lifted her chin, meeting the deputy's skeptical gaze. "We were married 3 days ago by Reverend Thompson in Willow Creek." Raines' foreman spat on the ground. "Convenient timing. Mr. Raines will be mighty interested to hear how his runaway bride found herself a new husband so quick." "My personal life is no longer Mr. Raines' concern," Katherine replied evenly. "As I'm sure he's aware, any claims he had were dissolved the moment I married Mr. Sutton." The deputy scratched his chin thoughtfully. "There's still the matter of the stolen property." "Marriage doesn't erase theft charges." Yates' expression hardened. "My wife took nothing that wasn't rightfully hers. If Raines has evidence suggesting otherwise, he's welcome to present it in court. Otherwise, I'd appreciate if you'd stop harassing my family based on the word of a man known for his vindictive nature." The standoff continued for several tense minutes before Deputy Miller reluctantly acknowledged there was little he could do. "I'll be informing Mr. Raines of this development." "Can't say he'll take it kindly." "That's his problem, not ours," Yates responded, his arm moving protectively around Katherine's waist. As the men rode away, Katherine let out a shaky breath. "Will this never end? Even married, he still pursues me." Yates turned to her, his expression grim but determined. "It will end, Katherine, I promise you that. Raines isn't the only one with connections in this county. It's time I called in some favors of my own." Over the next few weeks, Katherine settled more deeply into life as Mrs. Sutton. She took over the household accounts, discovering a talent for organization that helped streamline the ranch's operations. Yates, true to his word, began reaching out to influential friends and business associates, gradually building a network of protection around their family. Martha proved an invaluable ally, introducing Katherine to respectable women in town who could vouch for her character against Raines' slander. The local newspaper editor, a crusty old man named Jenkins who harbored his own grudge against Raines, published a flattering announcement of their wedding that portrayed Katherine as a respected Eastern teacher who had found love in the West. Slowly, the immediate threat from Raines began to recede. They heard through town gossip that he had already placed another advertisement for a mail-order bride, apparently deciding that pursuing Katherine was more trouble than it was worth. One warm evening in late summer, Katherine sat on the porch swing with Yates, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him as they swayed gently back and forth. "I received a letter today," she said, breaking their companionable silence. "From my aunt in San Francisco." Yates tensed slightly beside her. "Oh," Katherine smiled, hearing the carefully controlled worry in his voice. She apologized for not responding to my earlier letter. Apparently it arrived while she was visiting friends in Oregon. She turned to face him more fully. "She invited us to visit whenever we wish." "Us," Yates repeated, relief evident in his expression. "Of course us." Katherine took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Did you think I would leave? That I still considered our marriage temporary?" Yates looked down at their joined hands. "I wouldn't blame you if you did. You never chose this life, Katherine. It was thrust upon you by circumstance." "Perhaps initially," she agreed softly. "But every day since has been my choice. Every morning I wake beside you, every evening we share like this. These are the choices I make because I want this life. With you." The vulnerability in Yates' eyes made her heart ache. For all his strength and confidence in business and ranching matters, he still carried wounds from his past that made him doubt his worth in love. "I love you, Yates Sutton," Katherine said firmly, the words flowing easily now that she'd finally spoken them. "I love this ranch, this land, the life we're building together. I'm not going anywhere." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "I love you too, Katherine, more than I ever thought possible." He cupped her face gently. "When I offered marriage as a solution, I never imagined it would bring me such happiness." Their kiss was sweet and unhurried, filled with the comfortable intimacy that had grown between them over the weeks of their marriage. When they finally broke apart, Katherine rested her head on his shoulder again, content in the knowledge that what had begun as an escape had transformed into a homecoming. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the busy season of cattle drives, Katherine discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled their home with joy, Martha's excitement rivaling even that of the prospective parents. "A baby," Yates marveled one night, his hand resting reverently on Katherine's still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though his radiant expression had already answered her question. "Happier than I've ever been," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her lips. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Katherine." Life on the frontier was never easy. There were droughts that threatened their cattle, winters that tested their endurance, and occasional reminders that Bartholomew Raines still resided in the county, a shadow they couldn't entirely escape. But together, Katherine and Yates faced each challenge with the strength of their growing love. When their daughter was born the following spring, a healthy baby girl with her father's green eyes and her mother's determined spirit, they named her Hope, a testament to the emotion that had carried them through their tumultuous beginning. 2 years later, they welcomed a son they called Daniel, after Katherine's father. By then, the Sutton Ranch had prospered under their joint management, expanding to become one of the most respected operations in the county. Katherine had started a small school for the children of nearby ranchers, fulfilling her passion for education while raising her own family. Martha eventually married a kind-hearted blacksmith from town, though she and her husband built a home close enough to the ranch to remain an integral part of their extended family. Abe, growing older but still sharp-witted, became a beloved honorary grandfather to the Sutton children, teaching them to ride and telling them stories of the early days on the frontier. 5 years to the day after Katherine had fled from Bartholomew Raines in her torn wedding dress, news reached them that he had finally received his due. After his third wife mysteriously died, her brother, a Texas Ranger, had investigated and uncovered enough evidence to charge Raines with murder. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars, never again able to harm another woman. That night, Katherine and Yates sat on the same porch swing where they had shared so many evenings, watching their children play in the yard as the setting sun gilded their small figures. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Katherine asked, her head resting comfortably on her husband's shoulder. "If I hadn't escaped that day, or if you hadn't been passing by the train station at that exact moment." Yates tightened his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes. But then I look at our children, at everything we've built together, and I can only be grateful for whatever twist of fate brought you into my life." Katherine smiled, watching as 4-year-old Hope helped her little brother chase a butterfly through the tall grass. "That day when you found me, you promised me a gentle tomorrow." She turned to meet his gaze, her heart full of the love they'd nurtured through good times and bad. "You've given me so much more than that, Yates. You've given me a beautiful life." As the first stars appeared in the darkening Texas sky, Yates Sutton kissed his wife with all the tenderness of a man who knew the true value of what he'd found. Their beginning might have been born of desperation and chance, but their story had become one of choice, an abiding love, a love that would continue to grow with each passing season on the land they both now called home. And as twilight settled over the Sutton Ranch, bringing with it the familiar symphony of crickets and distant cattle, Katherine gazed out at the horizon with a sense of peace she'd once thought forever beyond her reach. The mail-order bride who had fled one man's cruelty had found, against all odds, a gentle heart and a true partnership with the cowboy who had offered his hand when she needed it most. Their love story, unexpected and unplanned, had become the greatest adventure either of them had ever known, and it was still only beginning.